Welcome everyone, and welcome our visitors from Bristol. We've got some visitors from Bristol, so welcome to Sheffield. We've entered the world of the Tantra at Sangha Night last week, and also with our Pabasamba Day festival on Sunday, which was very tantric. So we started a new theme, which is going to last until January, which is about Tantra for the modern world, and the path of pleasure, desire, energy. And so last week, that theme was introduced by Bodhinaga, and he talked about how there's lots of different aspects of Tantra. He talked about 5 different areas of Tantra that we're going to be looking at. He really evoked them, brought them to life. So there's the aspect that he focused on particularly last week, which is that Tantra uses direct experience. So Bodhinaga talked about that in particular last week. And this evening I'm going to talk about how Tantra uses magic and symbols and myth and archetype. And then, so we're going to have various talks about that over the next few weeks. And then there's other aspects of Tantra we're going to be focusing on. That Tantra is all about energy, using our energy, getting our energy involved in practice. That Tantra starts with highest, acting as if you were a Buddha, acting as if you were enlightened. And Tantra uses the strongest experience, our strongest experiences. So we're going to be entering this world. We kind of started to enter this world last week of Tantra, the world of Tantra. And we heard a bit about, quite a bit last week, and there's the image that's still staying with me, is the image of the darkening, which was left us with last week, but we might come back again to that image later on. So this week I'm going to be talking about making life magic, how we can make life magic. And to begin with, I want to tell a story. I'm going to probably tell a few stories during this evening's talk. But I'm going to start off with a story from 2,500 years ago of a tale of a magician, an ancient magician. And it's a story involving the Buddha. Just after the Buddha was enlightened, he'd got a few followers. He'd probably got about 60 followers or so. And he was just starting to make his way, along India, having been enlightened. He was starting to make his way through India, encountering people and telling them about his teaching. One of the first places he went to was, there was a camp of, 500 dreadlocked practitioners, kind of matted hair practitioners. We've got 2. There was 500 dreadlocked ascetics. And the Buddha went to them and he asked them an unusual question. They were fire worshippers, and they had a chamber with fire. That was the kind of essential part of their worship. And the Buddha said to them, "Can I spend the night in your fire chamber?" He went to the leader and said, "I'd like to spend the night in your fire chamber." And the leader said, "Well, you'd be very welcome to, but there's a fire-breathing Naga that lives inside this fire chamber, so you better not go inside. It's too dangerous." And the Buddha said, "Okay, well, that might be so, but I'd like to spend the night in the fire chamber. Would you let me spend the night in the fire chamber?" And again, the leader, who's called Kashyapa, repeated, "It's too dangerous. There's a fire-breathing Naga. You'll be burnt alive. You can't go in there." And then the Buddha asked the third time, and we're in the world of myth, and according to the kind of Buddhist myth, if the Buddha says something 3 times, it's going to happen. So he says the third time, "I want to spend the night in your fire chamber." And the third time, Kashyapa says, "Okay, if that's what you want, you can spend the night in the fire chamber." But he must have been thinking, that's the last we're going to see of this guy. We're not going to see him again. So the Buddha goes into the fire chamber, and there's a dragon, a fire-breathing Naga, a huge fire-breathing Naga. So I imagine something probably not quite as big as the Great Hall, maybe something a bit more like the Red Shrine Room downstairs. And there's a Naga filling most of the Red Shrine Room. And the Buddha, what the Buddha does is just sets up a meditation cushion. He gets some grass, makes a cushion, and just sits down and starts practicing mindfulness. Starts to practice the mindfulness of breathing. And the dragon, the Naga, sees the Buddha and becomes incensed, he becomes furious, and he fills the fire chamber with smoke. So the Buddha stays calm, he carries on meditating, and the Buddha thinks to himself, well, suppose I could produce smoke without harming the dragon. And that's what he does, he fills the fire chamber with his own smoke. which confuses the dragon a bit, but also makes him even more furious. And so this time the dragon produces flames, loads and fills the whole room full of flames. And then the Buddha stays calm and says, well, maybe I could produce flames. Suppose I could produce flames without harming the dragon. And so the Buddha fills the fire chamber with flames. And from the outside, all the people start to gather around. Who's this crazy kind of wonder who's gone inside the fire chamber? And then what it actually says in the sutta, they said, oh, he who is so handsome is going to be burned. He who is so handsome will be killed, destroyed by the Naga. But the Buddha stays in there the whole night. The flames just fill up the fire chamber for the whole night. And then in the morning, the Buddha steps out with his begging bowl, and the Naga is curled up inside his begging bowl. And he says to Kashyapa, here, Kashyapa, here's your Naga. I've fought his fire with fire. Which I love this. I absolutely love that story. I've told it before, but for me it's a story of the Buddha as a magician, the Buddha as a shaman almost. And it's a story in the Pali Canon. It's in the Vinaya Pitaka of the Pali Canon. So it's a story rooted in the Pali Canon, but it's a story of the Buddha as a tantric practitioner, the Buddha as a magician, the Buddha as a shaman. And whether or not we take the story literally true or not, maybe I'll say a bit more about that later. But what for me it illustrates is that the culture that the Buddha lived in, the culture of ancient India, was a culture of magic. It was a culture of mythic truth and magic. So in the Indian culture, Indians believed in devas and spirits. There were spirits in the trees, in the rivers, in the hills. There were devas of all kinds of different levels and categories, and creatures like nagas. And the suttas are full of these creatures and these kind of magical episodes. And it's true to say, as far as I know, it's true to say most cultures throughout our history have had a magical dimension to them, a magical element. Apart from ours, our culture seems to be one of the few, as far as I'm aware, that doesn't have this kind of tradition of magic and this kind of mythical dimension to life. But certainly, the time, the Indian tradition, which Buddhism grew out of, was a tradition of magic. And so, in that kind of culture, there'd be spells, incantations, magic spells. It'd be a culture of using magic for worldly ends. The people would go to shamans, to witch doctors, and they would get magic spells. They would ask for magic to be done, to make someone fall in love with them, to make them more successful, maybe to put a curse, maybe it'd be black magic, to put a curse on somebody, so somebody would get sick or would die. But India was a culture of magic. And it seems that Vajrayana, the tantric tradition, used that aspect of human culture, really, this aspect of magic, getting deep energies and using them to fulfill our desires, channeling them to fulfill our desires. The tantric aspect of Buddhism used this. It seems to have been born out of this kind of aspect of Indian culture. But Vajrayana doesn't use magic to transform and achieve worldly aims. Vajrayana uses, and the Tantra uses, magic to transform our inner aspect, our mind, our deepest energies, our wilder energies. And we heard a bit about this last week from Vedanya, and also at the weekend with Padmasambhava. So I'm just going to draw up a picture, and then I'll tell you another story. So it's a very rough picture of an iceberg. There we are, that's an iceberg. You might be able to tell. So that's the tip of the iceberg, and that's the water, and that's the rest of the iceberg. So, basically, it's just a metaphor. It's an image for me of our self, our being. So an image for me of our being is that the bit we're conscious of, our rational mind, the bit that we regard as me, is very much just like the tip of an iceberg, actually. And there's lots of aspects to our being which we're just not aware of. There are deeper drives, deeper energies, you could say wilder energies, all kinds of aspects of our being which we're just not aware of. And you could say that it's just, all this is below the surface. So often the image of water is used to stir, to evoke our depths, our deepest nature. And you could say, well, the bit we're aware of, the bit which I think of as me, as Bodhinaga, is just a very fraction a very small part of who I really am. And there's just all these depths, these deep unconscious energies which we're not aware of. And what we need to do in Buddhist practice is we need to harness that energy. We need to harness those energies and get them on side. And we heard a very evocative story of Padmasambhava when he tried to establish Buddhism in Tibet. We heard about that last week and again on Sunday. That Padmasambhava was sent for into Tibet to establish the Dharma because there had been attempts to build a monastery, and what people found was as they built the monastery by day, they would arrive the next day and all of their work had been undone. All of the stones had been put back into the ground and everything was as it's... that's the new microphones. That's beeping. Oh, it's a phone, it's a telephone. It's the magic of the mobile phone. Is it Padmasambhava? We better answer it if it's Padmasambhava. That's good, I thought the microphones were feeding back. That's good. So where were we? By day people were building the monastery, and by night demons and nagas and spirits were coming out of the depths and putting all the bricks back into the ground. So they weren't getting anywhere. They were making loads of effort, but they weren't getting anywhere. And it's a symbol, it's a metaphor, a mythic way of describing that we can be putting lots of energy, lots of willful effort into our practice, but if we haven't harnessed these deeper energies, these wilder aspects of ourselves, we're not going to get anywhere because they will undermine our efforts, they will fight with us, they'll compete with us. So Padmasambhava was sent for, and he was able to not slaughter or destroy the demons, as you might hear in other cultures. Padmasambhava, he befriended them, he won them over, he got them on side in all kinds of different ways. We heard, there's some demons that he poured gold into the rivers of the Nagas, and he showed them spiritual wealth. Apparently there's some who he just tamed in other ways, which I'll talk about later, by kind of having greater power, greater strength. And he made love to some of the demons. That was the way he converted some of the demons. So you get the sense that Padmasambhava is almost like a shaman figure. Yeah, he represents this tantric approach of getting our energies and harnessing them. And then, the end of the story is that rather than the demons pulling down the bricks in the walls, they were building them even faster. So the monastery got built at extra fast speed. And that kind of represents what our practice can be like if we've harnessed our deeper energies, these wilder energies, these aspects of ourselves that we're quite blind to, we're quite in a way unconscious of. So Indian culture was a very magical culture. That was the culture that the Buddha lived in, that Buddhism sprang out of, that the Vajrayana and Tantra sprang out of. But what about our culture? Well, as far as I'm aware, our culture seems to be, have a prevailing vision of a society which is more like a machine. Actually, that seems to be the kind of vision, the kind of the worldview that prevails in our society. That there aren't spirits in the rivers, in the trees, and in a sense that kind of thing is often laughed at. Where I grew up, it was laughed at. That in a sense, myth and magic are for kids in a way. They're kind of stories for kids, but they're not something to take seriously. Myths don't have value. That they're kind of, in a way, they're for children. They're not for adults. And the imagination is something that children use to play, but it's not something for adults. We end up with a kind of a view, a bit of a desolate kind of barren view of the world, of being, something which is just like a machine, a dead machine, with no, in a sense, no higher values or nothing really to live for. And a consequence of this is that people have nothing really to live for, no higher purpose to live for. This was certainly how I felt until I came across the Dharma. I felt like I didn't really have anything of value to live for, nothing to build my life upon. And this can be very painful for people, just to be living in that kind of way. So people can end up just kind of numbing themselves from that pain, or distracting themselves, or pursuing pleasure, because there isn't a real worthy purpose to live for, kind of a real meaningful myth to live by. So, I would argue that we need in our culture the Tantra more than ever. We need We need something to make life magical. We need to be able to make life magic. Yeah. So we need to enter the fire chamber. As Buddhist practitioners, we need to be like the Buddha. We need to not stay away from the fire chamber, not go in. We need to enter the fire chamber and sit with the Nagas and the dragons. We need to dance with the Darkinis, the sky dancers we heard about last week. We need to dance with the Darkinis. We need to become perhaps a bit like in our imagination, maybe really, we need to become magicians, kind of shaman magicians. We need to have that element in our lives. We need to make life magic. That's what I'm going to be talking about this evening, is how we can make life magic. And hopefully, as I'm doing that, a bit more of the importance of why we should do that will come out as well. Yes, I want to look at 4 areas that we can use to make life magic. And these 4 areas are myth and symbol, mantra and ritual. So hopefully I'll be able to just evoke a bit of how they can make a life magic. And I've used deliberately 5 different coloured sheets of paper to try and make myself feel a bit more tantric. Hopefully that will work. Now the green bit. So we need to become more like a shaman, more like a magician. And a shaman or a magician, they in a sense, they're a bridge between 2 different worlds. They're a bridge between this world that we experience, the kind of ordinary, mundane world we experience, and a more visionary world, a more magical, mysterious, spiritual world. So a shaman or a magician is almost like a bridge between 2 different worlds. And to bring our life, bring magic to our lives, we need to either learn how to enter this kind of other world, this kind of other realm, or at least become more receptive to it. And that's one way we can engage these kind of more wilder energies and kind of speak to them. So how do we do that? How can we engage with another realm? How can we enter another realm? What's Bodhinaga talking about? Are there other realms to enter? What is this kind of fanciful talk? Maybe it is, but I don't think it is. And what I would cite as evidence is that I gave a talk a couple of weeks ago about karma and how our experience of the world is shaped by our state of mind, the kind of particular state of consciousness that we've got. And lots of people can be in exactly the same physical space, but experiencing very, very different worlds, very, very different realms. So, for example, just in a very mundane way, we're all in the same room right now. Some of them will be having very, very different experiences. Some of you will be inspired and roused by my Dharma talk, and some of you won't be. Some of you might be quite bored. Some of you will be thinking about, dinner or what you did earlier. All kinds of different experiences will be going on. We can be in the same traffic jam, and some people will be completely relaxed, and some people will be boiling with rage. We can be in the same physical space and experiencing very, very different worlds, almost very, very different realms. So, and also people have got different senses. Actually, we experience the world through senses, and each of us have got different faculties, different qualities of senses. We'll be experiencing quite different worlds. So what I believe, what I've experienced from time to time is that there is more to our experience than we might usually experience on a day-to-day basis. There's more to life. There is a realm of archetype and myth which, in the right conditions and with the right kind of state of consciousness, we can experience, we can tap into. And it's a world of deeper truth more mythical truth, and it's a world of archetypal forms. And it's just as real, it's no less real than what we experience on a day-to-day basis, but we just might not have access to it depending on the state of mind that we're in, or the consciousness that we've got, our state of consciousness. So it's a bit like it's an additional sense or an additional faculty that we can cultivate, and it will depend very much on our conditions. So I want to just give an example, personal example, quite a very personal example on my ordination retreat at Gukkiloka, the retreat centre at Gukkiloka. And it was the night of my ordination. And Amoghavanksa, my preceptor, he was in a little hut with me, and there was 2 other people, an order member and another man about to be ordained. and we were doing a puja, and yeah, just to say actually the whole experience of being on that ordination retreat, the whole experience of Gukkiloka, those 4 months, were quite mythic for me. It seemed like in those conditions, particular kind of ritual context around it, but that whole aspect of experience was just much more alive, it was a much more magical experience. But in one particular story, on this particular evening, we were doing the puja, and I needed to choose which Buddha or Bodhisattva I was going to commit to visualise each day as a practice. And I'm a bit indecisive, or I used to be more indecisive, and I had kind of 3 that I was trying to decide between. Maybe the Buddha, historical Buddha, he's important, and I've got a bit of a connection with him. I've been to India. Padmasambhava, he's exciting, I've got a connection with Padmasambhava, maybe Padmasambhava. But in the background, kind of ever since my Mitra ceremony, when we chanted the Amitabha mantra, I'd felt a connection with Amitabha. It kind of just been this steady background connection with Amitabha. So what I decided to do was, I'm in a mythic space in the middle of the puja. I'm just going to do something mythic. I'm just going to kind of drop a question into my depths, or in my imagination, into the universe. I'm going to drop a question and just see what comes back. And the question was, well, just which of these figures should I pick? Which of these figures should I choose to meditate on? Which was going to be my connection to the transcendental? And so I dropped the question in, and the answer came back to me, Amitabha. And so I thought, well, I'm going to do this 3 times to be properly mythic. So I asked the question 3 times, and each time I had a kind of stronger sense of Amitabha, just a kind of real deep, reassuring sense. It's Amitabha. Amitabha is the right figure to choose. And then I opened my eyes, and something magical happened for me. The whole room seemed to be filled with a red light. The whole room seemed to be kind of diffused with a red light. And I kind of closed my eyes again and opened them again, and the red light was still there. And I looked around, and Satyaraja was in the room with us, and he was smiling. And I looked out, and the whole sky was red. The whole sky, there was this amazing red sunset across the whole valley, and there's this red light just kind of permeating the valley and filling the room that we were sitting in. And Satyaraja kind of grinned and said, "Oh, it's a good sign. Amitabha, that's a good sign." And yeah, it was just a really kind of magical. Yeah, it's probably one of the most magical moments I've experienced, but a real magical moment. But those 4 months were filled with those kind of moments really, where I suppose in a different state of mind I would just say, well, there's a sunset. What's the big deal? There's a sunset, but to me it wasn't a sunset. There was a real. There was something going on, something magical was going on, and I think depending on the state of mind, particularly in retreat conditions, this kind of mythic dimension of reality is much more accessible. So I think our job as practitioners, if we're going to try and become more like shaman or magicians on the tantric path, is to just be more receptive to this aspect of reality. Some more to say about that. Well, maybe that there are different levels of truth. This is another way of looking at this, but there's the everyday truth that we see, and there's just different layers of truth. And one of the layers of truth is a mythic truth. It's almost like a deeper truth, and this can come out in things like fairy stories and folk legends, myths, fables. There's a deeper mythic level of truth that's communicated, and maybe I'll say a bit more about that later, but just to be receptive to that there are different layers of truth, and this mythic layer of truth is just as important, just as real as the kind of mundane lectern, floor, whatever it is, the kind of this day-to-day reality. But an important aspect of this type of realm is archetypal forms. And this is another kind of a very important area for Buddhist practitioners. And we heard last week about some of these archetypal forms that the Vajrayana uses. We heard about the wrathful forms, such as Vajrapani. So Vidanya evoked the image of Vajrapani wreathed in flames, kind of legs like tree trunks, and a huge torso, kind of with skulls trampling on his opponents, his enemies, holding a Vajra, wreathed in flames. So quite wrathful figures. And the Tantra, Vajrayana is full of these wrathful deities, wrathful figures, which are quite shocking, actually, quite scary and challenging. And so it's these figures, what they do is they speak to the submerged part of the iceberg. They speak to the kind of these wilder, untamed aspects of our being and interest them. They challenge them. We can study all the concepts we want. We can learn all the lists we want, but that's not going to interest these kind of wilder parts of our being. So we need something that's going to be quite shocking sometimes, something quite challenging. So we've got the wrathful deities, the wrathful figures of Vajrapani. We've got arresting figures like the Darkini. We heard about the Darkini, the archetypal form of the Darkini, the naked red sky dancer, the naked woman with large breasts which give pleasure and bliss, and drinking something that looks like blood out of a skull cup, and stamping on the body of her former self. So some really weird images actually from the Vajrayana, from the Tantra. But the Darkini, and maybe a figure that's much more accessible is Padmasambhava. We had Padmasambhava Day on Sunday, but for me, Padmasambhava, he represents, part of the aspect of Padmasambhava, he represents this kind of shamanic magician archetype. He's somebody who he can dance with the Darkinis, he can teach them, he can harness the energies of that wilder aspect. I think it's important to say these archetypal forms, they're not manufactured symbols. They're not kind of symbols that somebody's thought, we need something to, wake us up a bit, or kind of get the kind of lustful energies going. So let's have a naked sky dancer. Let's have a blue figure wreathed in flames, because that'll be a bit exciting. They're not manufactured forms. They are, they're enlightenment evoked in a visual form. They are enlightenment. The image of Padmasambhava is an image of enlightenment, and the image of Vajrapani is another image of enlightenment. So all the archetypal images, they are enlightenment in image form. They're not manufactured images. So symbols are hugely important. And if we're going to be a magician and we're going to make life more magical, we're going to need to interact with symbols. And I've got a couple. There's the Vajra. We heard about the Vajra last week, which is the diamond thunderbolt. So the image of the diamond thunderbolt, which can crash through destructions, crash through delusions. So it's a diamond and a thunderbolt fused together. So there's the kind of crackling energy of lightning and thunderbolt, and the kind of purity of a diamond and the force of a diamond. So the image of a Vajra, and the Vajrayana is named after this image. It's the vehicle of the Vajra. So we get these, the Tantra is full of symbols which will evoke and speak the language of our depths. So we've got the Vajra. And this is what I was looking for earlier. We've got the Purba, the demon dagger. Which again is just really weird, isn't it? Just kind of really, what is it about? It's got three faces. It's got a horse's head, that look like serpents at the bottom with their tail around a sharp point. It's a dagger, and it's sometimes called a demon dagger, or a Purba, which is used in Tantric Buddhism. So what on earth is this for? Why on earth would we have that? We're Buddhists, we're non-violent, and we love people, and we've got compassion, so why would we have a dagger with a horse's head on the top of it? What on earth could that be about? This is an implement that Padmasambhava wields to tame the demons. And again, we're speaking on the level of mythic truth. So Padmasambhava didn't stab people, and we don't stab people as Buddhists. What Padmasambhava would do with the demon dagger is pin down. It's said that Padmasambhava would just pin down a demon and just have a really good look at it. And so rather than the demon having control, having power, if you've got the demon pinned down and you're looking at it, well then you've got control over the demon. You're no longer in the grip of that wilder energy. So it represents, you could say it represents the kind of the razor sharp pinpoint awareness that we can bring, mindfulness, when we bring it towards our emotions and our experience. So rather than being in the grip of a hindrance, rather than being in the grip of a really strong, violent emotion, with awareness, it's though we can pin it down and we can look at it. So the purva it's a much better way of saying that. You know, you could just say, well, become aware of your habits and your hindrances, or you could say, you know, pin down the demons, have a really good look at them. And for me, that's just got a lot more juice. It's a lot more potent way of saying the same thing, or a similar thing. But yeah, and one of the things Padmasambhava does, he'll pin down the demon, but then the way he tames them, the way he gets power over them, is he uses them by their true name. He calls the demon by its true name. He knows the true name of the demon. And then the demon has to subdue, the demon has to surrender and serve Padmasambhava. If you know the true name of a demon and you can name it, then it's no longer got power over you. And again, this is a mythic way, a poetic way of saying, if you really identify. I mean, 2 weeks ago I gave pretty much the same talk as I'm giving now, but in a very, very different way. I talked about habits, and I talked about karma, and I talked about you can bring awareness to your habits, and you can transform them. And part of being able to do that is just be able to name it, just to say, well, this is what's going on, this is what's happening right now. And being truthful with yourself, being honest with yourself, saying, this is what I'm up to, this is what has been going on. And it's very powerful if you can do that, if you can name what's really happening. It's very, very powerful. And it's even more powerful if you can name it to your friends, if you can speak to somebody you trust and say, look, this is what's been going on, this is what I've been doing, then that's no longer got any power over you. So there's two different ways you can tell the same truth, really. And for me, it's much more powerful to say, well, if you can name a demon by its true name, then it's no longer got power over you. So truth is very powerful, and language is very powerful. So I was a bit down on our culture earlier, talking about there being a kind of lack of myth and a lack of magic in our culture, but it's not entirely true, because there are some really good stories, and in particular some really good fantasy writers, which can evoke some of these dharmic truths. And there's a book called The Wizard of Earthsea. The Wizard of Earthsea, and it's a trilogy, the Earthsea trilogy. And it was written in the 1970s by a lady called Ursula Le Guin. And it's a story about wizards, and a particular wizard called Sparrowhawk. And he learns his true name, which is Ged or Jed. He learns that later on. But it uses this. It's quite a similar kind of way of talking about things. In the school, this guy goes to wizard school, which is a bit of a forerunner to Harry Potter, but a lot better. And he goes to this wizard school, and basically they have to study. What they have to study is the name of everything in the ancient language. There's an ancient language, and they need to learn the name of everything in this sacred language. And once they've learned the name of things, then they've got control. They can use magic. That's how they get magic, is to learn the true name of things. That's how they can work magic. And he later in the story has to face a dragon, and he's able to tame, or not tame it, but just strike a deal, strike a bargain with this dragon, because he guesses its true name in the ancient language. Our culture, our own culture, has these kind of ideas. And so the truth, there's an idea throughout traditions, particularly in Buddhism, that truth can be very powerful. And the true name of things can be very, very powerful. And that's where magic comes from, is if you learn the true name of things. Which brings us on to start to talk about mantra. Because in Indian culture, their association with language, their relationship with language, is that language originally came from the gods, came from a higher realm. So there's a kind of a higher divine language, and human beings have kind of just forgotten how to speak it. We've kind of lost touch with this divine language. So our day-to-day language, according to ancient Indian culture, has lost touch with this kind of an ancient divine language. But according to Indian legends, Sanskrit, the language of Sanskrit, has connections with this kind of ancient divine language. And yeah, the syllables and the words that go up to use mantras come from this language, this divine language of Sanskrit. But yeah, in Indian culture as well, if you were able to name a spirit, then you could bind the spirit and use magic. This is where magic spells came from in India. You could conjure up a spirit and get it to do what you wanted, using its name, using a special spell and incantation. Which again, it might sound fanciful to us, but not to the ancient Indian culture. That was how spells derived. If you knew the name of a spirit, you could call it, you could evoke it. Maybe we don't want to do that. Well, hopefully we don't want to do that. We don't want to conjure up spirits to bend to our will. But if we want to transform our mind, then we need to know, it's helpful to know the right words to use in a sacred language. It's very, very helpful. And luckily there are spells or incantations that we can use to conjure up bodhisattvas and buddhas, the kind of deeper energies, the helpful deeper energies within the universe, and we call these mantras. I call these mantras. Well, we do call them mantras, but not everybody will call them ways to evoke spirits, but I'm going to, because we're in this kind of mythic, magical space. So basically a mantra is, actually this is what a mantra I was reading about it this week, and mantras, they derive from this exactly the same principle. They were sacred syllables. So a mantra, just as Padmasambhava, the image of Padmasambhava with his purba and his beard and his skull cup and his pirate's hat, just that image of Padmasambhava is an image of enlightenment in visual form. A mantra is a symbol of enlightenment in sound form and in syllable form. So when you're chanting the mantra of Padmasambhava, that is enlightenment, that is Padmasambhava. That isn't just a song, it's not a song you're singing. It is enlightenment. You are evoking the power and the energy of Padmasambhava through chanting those syllables. The sacred syllables are very, very potent. So, I was chatting to a friend last night and he was saying he'd been chanting the Padmasambhava mantra on a retreat and then again at the weekend, and it felt as though he was filled with energy and inspiration, and it was almost like he was a balloon, and if you cut his string he would just float away. He felt energised by chanting the Padmasambhava mantra. And it's not, we wondered if it was hyperventilation, but it's not hyperventilation. It's sacred syllables. This is magic. The mantra is magic. It's not. It will transform your mind. You chant a mantra and you are connecting directly with enlightenment. It's not. It's not just a made-up song. These are sacred syllables. So they're not to be used lightly. A mantra is very, very powerful. It's a spell. It's an invocation. And what it's conjuring up isn't something to curse another person or to make someone fall in love with you. You're conjuring up different qualities of enlightenment. You're conjuring up qualities of compassion, of energy, wisdom. These are all qualities, and mantras will have that effect on you. So when you're chanting a mantra, don't worry about what the words mean, what they translate to in English. Don't worry about how it works. Just notice the effect it has on you. If a particular mantra that you chant, and it does give you confidence, or it gives you an uplift, or it makes you feel inspired or magical, whatever effect it has on you, just notice that and connect with it. So sound can be very important for people. In fact, I'd say sound is the most important way I connect with the mythic and the archetypal realm. It's through mantra. I'm not really a very visual person. We're all visual people in different ways, but for me sound is much more potent, much more important. It's always been kind of mantra, and in particular the closing mantras in puja, where they have a real effect on me. There's a real kind of tangible space is created in the room between us. So mantras can be very, very potent. And there's an order member called Padma Vajra, who is coming in a few weeks' time to give a talk. He's our president of the centre. He's coming in a few weeks' time. And the way he chants mantras just has a real effect on me. I don't know if he'll be chanting mantras when he's up, but at Padmaloka, where he's based, if he's leading a puja and he's chanting, my chest vibrates. I don't know how he does it, but he's chanting, and I can feel my chest vibrating. Well, how's he doing that? He's he's sitting miles away, but something about the kind of particular, I don't know, frequency or particular syllables he's chanting, but something triggers and it just resonates. It seems to resonate in my being. There's much more I could say about mantra, but I won't go on too long. Maybe a couple of just very quick asides. One is, I was watching a YouTube video about a jazz, I don't know what instrument he plays, Herbie Hancock, a jazz musician called Herbie Hancock. And he was talking about the kind of power of sound, in a way, to connect with people. It just connects directly, rather than just hitting the kind of tip of the iceberg. The kind of rational part of sound just permeates our whole being. And he talked about a particular gig that he was playing in America in 1972. And he said that, the musicians, they'd been out on a bit of a bender, they'd been out on an all-night drinking session, and they were really tired, and they didn't know how they were going to conjure up the energy to play in this particular gig. He asked the bass player to start off, because he thought, I'm too tired, I'll choose a song where the bass player starts. And the bass player started, and he said, Herbie Hancock said, the bass player made noises on the bass that had never been heard before, and he did things with his fingers that had never been done on a bass before. And Herbie Hancock, the whole audience couldn't believe what he was doing. And it inspired the rest of the band to kind of just play out of their skins in a way. They kind of played in a way they hadn't played before. And he said that the audience were coming up to them for the first time and saying, well, not that they just heard the music, but that they experienced the music, that they experienced the music at the same time as the musicians. And so Herbie Hancock was just really interested to know what was the bass player doing in a way. Whatever he was drinking, he wanted to drink it. What was the bass player doing? And the bass player said, I'm really glad you've asked me. I've been chanting a Buddhist mantra. And it's just really opened up my experience of playing jazz. And since then, Herbie Hancock became a Buddhist, and he a Nichiren Buddhist. So the particular mantra, it's all around chanting a mantra. I don't know the mantra. It's all about chanting this particular mantra. And Herbie Hancock in this video is talking to Harvard University about jazz and about Buddhism and creativity. But he says, well, basically this mantra is the rhythm of the universe. And by chanting this mantra, you become aligned with the rhythm of the universe. And it just seems to go well with playing jazz, basically. I loved that story about mantra and sound and creativity. And there's a really good talk by Padma Vajra on Free Buddhist Audio called The Sound of Reality. And Padma Vajra talks about his own entry into Buddhism, which was through jazz in the early 70s, listening to John Coltrane play jazz. And Padma Vajra's first involvement with he didn't have 12-week beginners courses like we have. His first night at a Buddhism class was a 50-minute metta bhavana and then a 7-fold puja. And it was that was his first entry into Buddhism. But by the end of it, he said, by the end of the mantras, the closing mantras, it was just, he described a sense of relief. And on other occasions, he talked about, he just knew at that point he was a Buddhist. And he knew at that point he was going to be an order member. And it was just his first night, and it was just the response within him to the sounds of the puja and the mantras that really resonated with him. So, take mantras very, very seriously. They are enlightenment in sound form, in the sacred syllables, so take them very seriously. A couple of quick anecdotes, really. Again, I mentioned Amitabha earlier, which is the main figure I connect with. And something magical seems to happen whenever I chant most of the time I chant the Amitabha mantra. It changes my state of mind, and what happens is I notice beauty around me. I might just be walking down the street, I might even be in the shower. Whatever I'm doing, I'm chanting the mantra and I just notice the sun shining through the water in the shower, or I notice this, it's often connected with the sun as well, the sun shining, or some particular way the light is striking a leaf or something. But whenever I chant the Amitabha mantra, I just become more aware of beauty. So if something happens where it just changes my state in a way, I just become more receptive to beauty. Padmasambhava mantra, when I chant the Padmasambhava mantra, something happens which you could describe as stirring energy, stirring the depths. It's quite challenging actually, quite, for me, quite scary, some of the things that I've encountered about myself after chanting the Padmasambhava mantra. So I do chant that with a bit more caution these days. And but there's a particular flavour, and a particular effect that it can have. And then the Vajrasattva mantra, there's a figure called Vajrasattva, there's a mantra, the mantra of Vajrasattva. And for me, I feel cleaned out. I chant the Vajrasattva mantra sometimes 108 times. That's a traditional way to chant it, and I feel cleaned out. I feel it's, I don't know if that's a good way to describe it, and a helpful way to describe it. It's as though, ethically, all the kind of gubbiness has been cleaned out, been kind of polished. I don't want to say, but maybe a colonic irrigation. a spiritual colonic irrigation. Just we're kind of cleaned out. I didn't want to say that, but I couldn't think of a better way of saying that. So just a few more things about mantra. Just that you can use mantra as a magic spell to protect your mind, and particularly in challenging situations. So if you're in a demanding situation at work or at home, you can feel you're going to react, or it's going to be a dangerous situation ethically. Chant a mantra. You can use a mantra to protect your mind in that situation. If you don't believe it, try it and see if it works. And then there's something else around magic and spells and incantations and the metta bhavana. I just wanted to say, well, the metta bhavana is magic. And, if you, again, don't believe it, try it. If you try the metta bhavana, it will change your state of mind, and particularly over long periods of time. And it will seem, it affects other people's states of mind. I don't know how, I can't tell you how it works, but other people will be affected by your practice of the metta bhavana. It's magic. And I've heard Vedanya talk in the past about how black magic is where you just really focus your volition and your desires around, in a way, harming somebody. And metta is the opposite of that. Metta is white magic. Metta, you're focusing your deepest volitions around someone to become happier, someone to become more successful, to develop, to become free of suffering. And it works. I don't know how it works, but it works. And there's been, numerous times where I've just been bringing somebody to mind in the metta bhavana. I've not had contact with them for a long time, and then they send me a text message whilst I've been doing the metta bhavana, or they ring me, or we get, something happens. It does seem to be magic. So I'm not going to explain how it's magic, but try it. Do the metta bhavana, try it. And then maybe the last thing to say is to join the choir, or try the choir on a Friday evening. Kate leads a choir where they chant mantras. And if you're somebody who is interested in mantras or thinks they might be interested in mantras, well, go to the choir on a Friday night. So onto the red bit of paper now, which is the last bit of paper. So finally, if you want to make your life more magic, ritual is very, very important. If you want to be a shaman or a magician and practice on the tantric path, ritual is really, really important to get to harness these energies. And ritual brings together all of the different elements we've been talking about. Ritual brings them all together. And in the Vajrayana, there's some, as you'd expect, wacky rituals, some kind of really unusual rituals. So the ritual I've heard about where you visualise yourself chopping yourself up with a butcher's implement that we heard about last week, and then feeding yourself to your demons. That's one Vajrayana kind of tantric ritual. So we don't do that. Well, actually, some people do that. Actually, some order members do that, but I don't do that. We don't do that. What we do is something I think much more potent, which is the sevenfold puja. We do a ritual called the sevenfold puja, which should come with a health warning. Actually, the sevenfold puja should come with a health warning. We heard earlier what it did for Padmavajra when he first encountered the sevenfold puja. And I think it's true that Sangha has said that he sometimes, I don't know if this is, I've heard this, I don't know if it's true, but I've heard Sangha has said that perhaps only order members ought to do puja, because it's a kind of as potent a practice as sadhana practice, as visualization practice. And it can, puja and ritual is a potent practice. But it depends how you engage with it. This is really important, because I've also heard pujas that don't feel very tantric and kind of feel quite flat. And it's kind of like, with mandala, verbu, lotus, and jasmine, and all that. Basically, just, it's this kind of a monotonous, deadpan, kind of just very flat, going through the motions, really. And so puja can be very, very potent if we bring our imagination to it, if we bring our emotions to it, if we bring our desires to it. Puja can be very, very potent. So in the stages of the sevenfold puja, they've each got a different emotional flavour to them, and you can use your imagination to engage with the images, to engage with the imagery, to bring it alive. You can really try and connect with a sense of devotion, connect with a sense of wanting to regret, remorse about ethical shortcomings, connect with a sense of rejoicing in the good in the world, connect with a sense of wanting to learn. And in each of these different stages there is an emotional flavour. And puja becomes powerful, puja becomes magic when you connect with it in that way. When you connect with it emotionally, that's when it becomes magic. So bring your imagination and engage your emotions with puja, and that's when it will become to life. We had an experience, those of us who came to the Padmasambhava Day ritual on Sunday will have had an experience of this. And again, we've all got different experiences going on, so not everybody will have done, but for me, there was something very, very magical, something very, very potent about the Padmasambhava Day puja, particularly like the trumpets. Martin was playing a Tibetan trumpet, and the other Martin was clashing cymbals, and there was a drum being played by Michael. So coming up the stairs, something in me knew something was going to happen, something unusual was going to happen. I was entering into a ritual space, a kind of magical space. So we're coming up the stairs with this trumpet playing out and drums banging. And then there was the mantras. The mantras were just really chanted beautifully. There'd been the rehearsal and the choir were chanting, so it was really, really beautiful mantras. And, there were people dressed as Darkanese. There was even a little skeleton, a tiny skeleton was making its way around the room. 5-month-old skeleton. It was a very, very potent festival, a potent ritual. So we've got another chance on Tuesday. Next Tuesday, we're going to be performing a sevenfold puja, maybe a bit tantric sevenfold puja at Sangha Night. So it's a chance to bring all these elements together, to bring together the element of chanting, the element of mythic truth and the mythic dimension, the element, all the symbolism, the very rich symbolism. It's a chance to really engage with that and become shaman, become magicians, and really engage with Tantra. So hopefully that's been a little bit about how to make your life more magic, and come along next week and we'll practice a tantric puja.